This presentation shows how to create a folder routing list in the latest release of DesignDataManager, version 2007.1. The sample routing list shown here is a 5-step engineering change notification routing with approval at 2 stages. The method of creating folder routings is flexible and can be adapted to match many business processes. Folder routing lists are created in the DesignDataManager administration tool. Once we have the admin tool open, we can navigate to the Folders tab. From here we can look at the folder templates that we have already created. If we take a look at the Ecn folder template, we can see that we have a routing already defined and assigned to the Ecn folders called Routing A. We will create a new routing list for the Ecn folder type and use it to replace this old routing. To do this, we click on the Routing List button. We can see that 3 routing lists are already defined in our database, including Routing A that we saw a moment ago. To create a new routing list, we either click the icon on the menu bar or right-click in the upper panel and select Add. Now in the lower panel, we start to define the new routing by giving it a name, description and version number. We are now ready to define the first step by clicking the Add button. The first step is given a name and description, and then we start to define the rules for this step. To do this, we set the folder state on arriving at this step and also assign the folder to a group. Here we select Proposed and Ecn Proposers. The folder states are defined in the folder template. You should check the names of the folder states in the folder template that you will be assigning this routing to, as a state drop-down list is not used. In this case we have the states Proposed, Active and Closed. Once we have the first basic step set up, we click OK and move on to the next step. Now add the second step. This step sets up the Ecn Authorisation. Once we've filled in the basic step rules, we can review the other options available to us in the configuration window. Within the basic step rules, we can send an email notification to let others know that the folder has reached this stage. We can also set timeout rules. If the folder remains at this step beyond a set period of time, we can make a number of things happen. We can again set up an email notification to alert people to the fact that the folder is stalled at this step. This notification can be set to repeat if the folder remains at this step beyond the first timeout. Alternatively, we can automatically forward the folder to a separate routing altogether. For this step, we will set a timeout notification to send an email back to the proposers so that the originator can check to see why the folder has not been approved. Once this is complete, we can OK this and move to the third step. The third step is where the work to implement the engineering change is carried out. Notice that the state has now changed to active. The Ecn is approved for implementing. Again, we set a timeout rule to notify the Ecn Authorizer group if this folder is stalled at this step. The fourth step is the second approval stage. Here the work is checked and released. The fifth and final step is Ecn completion. All work is complete and the folder state is set to closed. We can arrange to send an email back to the Ecn proposer informing him that the engineering change is now complete. We now store the steps defined so far before defining the workflow by creating the links between the individual steps. We do that now. Double-click the Ecn routing to enter edit mode and now edit the individual steps to define the links. As we edit the first step, we notice that we can jump to a separate routing if necessary. We do not have to stay within the routing we're currently working on. It may be that for some engineering changes some costing work is required. In this case we could jump to a costing routing before rejoining the Ecn routing list. For now we will define steps within this routing. We go through the same process for the remaining steps. However, with the approval stage we have two options to select. We can approve the Ecn and step forward to the IM Work stage, or we can reject it and return the folder to the Ecm proposers. The remaining steps are defined following the same pattern. To complete the routing list we must define the first step, in this case the Ecm Proposal Step. We must again store the changes before creating the graphical workflow diagram. Again double-click Ecn Routing to edit the routing list and click on the Preview button. We are prompted that there is no preview defined and that the default layout will be used. The default layout has all steps overlaid with the final step on top, and we must drag these around the window to create our graphical workflow preview. We'll spend some time doing that now. Now we have the layout defined, we can see some icons used within the routing which indicate the steps that have a timeout with email notification assigned. If we right click on any of the steps, we have the option to refine the graphics by assigning colours, rounding the corners, or modifying the fonts used within the boxes. Once complete, we now save the preview and store all changes we have made to the routing list. The routing list must be made active so that we can assign it to a folder template. Right-click the Ecn routing list and select Activate. If you are unable to activate the folder, check that you have defined a first step in the routing list. Return now to the folder types and assign the new routing list to the Ecn folder template. Remember as well to remove the original routing we had assigned, routing A. We are now ready to use this Ecn routing from within DesignDataManager. This is shown in a separate movie. Review this to understand how to create a folder from the folder template and send it into an Ecn folder routing list.